Welcome, everyone, and welcome to the December 14th work session of the Lane Community College Board of Education. Happy holidays, everyone who's here and anyone who may be viewing online. Will you please take the roll?
Lisa Brattle,
Present.
Austin Bull-Maybe,
Austin may be a bit late.
Holly Johnson,
Present.
Steve Mattel,
Here.
Rosie Pryor,
Here.
Angela Van Cross.
Present.
Wonderful. Board member, he is chairing a Springfield Utility Board meeting this evening. We usually start our meetings with a land recognition, and I would like to welcome. Are you going to do it, Chris? Very good.
Good evening, everyone. Today I will present the acknowledgement of homeland. I'd like to start our meeting with the acknowledgement that the land we are on is the traditional homelands of the Kalapuya people. The Kalapuya were stewards of this very land for over 14,000 years before their traditional way of life was forever disrupted and destroyed. We start our meeting with humility and reverence for the original inhabitants, the Kalapuya. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda this evening? Is there a motion to adopt the agenda? So moved. That would be
Second. Second.
Holly, thank you. Would you call the roll, please?
Lisa Brattle,
Yes.
Holly Johnson,
Aye.
Steve Mattel,
Aye.
Rosie Pryor, Angela Van Cross.
Aye.
Motion carries. The agenda is adopted. The first item for discussion this evening is board policy. President Walter.
Yes, we'd like to start with board policies this evening, and that's my way to guide us through that.
Thank you, President Bolger. As you see, we've gone to our maybe 7th iteration of exactly how these are going to be presented. Hopefully this is helpful. Unless you all want it differently, I think what we're going to do is we're going to have a recommendation section in the current lane policy, if there is one. Then what I literally pull it straight from the OCCA library, and then the recommended policy along with any other references. If there's a college policy of COPS or something in a collective bargaining agreement or something, that will be sort of at the end. So, and then along with the crosswalk. So that's how we sort of changed up a little bit. You all on your toes, and I would happy to take any questions that you might have on any of this policy.
Questions, observations from board members? Lisa.
Yes, I like the new format, thank you. It's like you just made little improvement after little improvement. I had a question about the recommended policy board policy 7350 resolutions. And I'm glad to see this policy being recommended. I think it will be a benefit to the college to encourage employees and give them the opportunity to participate in an exit interview when resigning. I guess the one thing I am curious about is, do we need language that would suggest something around if I'm assuming that's implying human resources staff, but to create some type of safe space for people, like what if they need an alternative to be able to provide that exit?
You mean who would be the person taking it on behalf of the college?
Yeah.
Why don't we have Shane perhaps? address
Yeah, how we do it.
Sure. Traditionally, it's me who would have that exit interview, but I can understand a situation where somebody maybe doesn't feel comfortable sharing that with me, and so we can approach that in a few different ways. We can have them suggest an alternate. That might be an option, and so maybe we can play with the language a little bit and bring something back.
I don't, I would assume that designating human resources staff is at the board level for policy, and I'm fine with that, but I was curious, and if there's a practice that we can provide an alternative, that would be, I think, meeting the concern I have.
Sure.
Chief,
Mike, maybe you could just describe why are you advising that we have an exit interview or a resignations and exit interview policy?
I think it's simply because we want to have a way to officially accept resignations, right? How the resignation is going to be, who at the college is going to be responsible for accepting resignations as the president or the president's designee. And then exit interviews, I think we just want to encourage. I think that provides us, if we can, we would never force somebody to have an exit interview, but if they want to have an exit interview, it provides us feedback on things we might be able to do better, things that we're maybe doing well, and so that we can make tweaks if necessary on how we're doing things to make our current employees feel better about working at Lane, and perhaps if there are things that we don't know about, we can change. That's why I would encourage exit interviews when agreed to by the resignation, the person submitting the resignation, for sure. I mean, this is not legally required, right? So if we didn't have this policy, it's not, this is legally advised. So if you did not want to have this policy, I don't think.
I guess my concern a little bit is that, employee X decides they don't want to work here anymore. Right now, they don't have to submit a resignation letter. They probably inform their boss or whatever it is, and how informally or however they do that. That may or may not percolate up to the president, probably does at some point, but not necessarily before their last day. This kind of puts the president, it sounds like to me, on the hook for reaching back and say, no, you got to submit this letter of resignation first. So it might create a bit of work.
Yeah, I don't think there's, I don't think, I think the president would designate to whom she wants to give the power to accept resignations, right? So if obviously if it's a cabinet member, it probably would be the president. If it's a staff member in a department, it might be that department manager. It could be the VP, the cabinet member over that area. That would be sort of solely up to the president to decide how she wanted to authorize the acceptance of resignations. We would prefer to have a letter, obviously, or an email, something in writing saying I'm resigning as of this day. Clearly, that's not always the case, and so what I would suggest becomes the resignation letter would be something that goes in that person's file. I mean, if somebody obviously walks off the job and just tells their manager I quit and goes and gets in their car and you never see them again, they've effectively resigned. It's not as if they have resigned, but we would want to put something in writing in their file saying, Joe Smith left the job on whatever the date was.
Okay.
other questions, comments from board members about the policies under review this evening? Angela?
No surprise there, dozens of questions. I did submit many of them in advance. Thank you for the responses. Rosie, I'm not sure if I have leave to sort of run through all of them, if I should just take them one at a time or start with maybe the first policy I had questions about. So I'll start with the first one and then I'll pause and see if we want to sort of spread the love so others can also comment. The first one in the list is OCCA BP 5010 and current LCC BP 705. My question about that was in the section that says, under no circumstances shall an applicant who's otherwise qualified be denied admission or given a preference for admission to the college. I'm curious about why we would not allow giving a preference for admission. I can certainly understand why we would want to avoid denying admission. excuse me, based on the sort of subsequent list of protected categories. So I guess that language doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It doesn't seem necessary in my mind. In addition, the list that we have is not as robust, I think, or as complete as it could be. And I don't fully remember the entire conversation that we had in October of 2019 regarding a list of protected classes that was recommended by OCR. But our lists in our policies don't match that list. There are a few items missing. And so I'm not sure if this is the time or place, but I would love to reopen that discussion and understand why we have a less thorough list. So that's on those policies.
So I think in response to the first question, I think it's an issue of open access, right? So you're not going to deny anybody admission based on those on those characteristics. We wouldn't really deny anybody admission at all, as long as they fill out an application and meet whatever criteria we have, none of which would be related to the, membership in any of the classes, whether it's this list or a more robust list. So I believe that's why that language is in there. As far as the list goes, and this is unfortunate, and I think it's probably true of most places that have many rules. You've got rules that relate to lists such as this that you put into place at one point, and then you come back and put other rules in for other areas, and they sort of stack on top of each other, and you either forget or don't think about it, going back and making sure they all align, right? So aligning this list with the list that we discussed before would not be a problem. I don't see that as any issue at all. We could certainly make those changes and align the lists. And I'm sure there's probably some other lists that when we dig into COPS and other areas that may have, different groups included or different groups excluded. So yeah, I think you make a good point as far as trying to make it as uniform as possible.
I think we didn't actually update the list in BP 505 during that discussion to be the more comprehensive list provided by the Office of Civil Rights. And so I'm not sure if that was an intentional board decision, because I simply can't remember, or if that was an oversight. So I feel like it would be worth it to discuss amongst this current board how we feel about that more comprehensive list. But again, I don't know if this is the right time or place for that.
Comments? So are board members wanting to not forward this particular policy to the January 4th consent agenda, or to forward it? I'm not getting a good sense of the board's will. Lisa.
So I do remember the conversation that board member Van Kraus is referring to. And for some, and I agree, I believe we updated a specific board policy, but I'm guessing it's going to come up again and again. And I guess what I can't remember is what that list looked like exactly. And I'm not 100% certain of what the list that Angela is referring to looks like either. I certainly would be supportive of identifying what our accepted list is and making sure that we're being consistent with it through all of our board policies.
If I recall, I think we had an OCCA policy that did not have all of the categories, and we added the categories from the current lane policy. I would be happy to go back and find that, and between now and the board meeting in January, send it to all of you to take a look at and add to, delete from, whatever your pleasure.
And then make sure that this policy includes whatever the end result of that deliberation is, if that would work for this policy.
Sounds like a good suggestion to me. Does that work for my colleagues? Does that work for you, Angela? Suddenly we've lost Angela. There you are. Does that work for you?
I'm on mute. I'm just playing the list. That's my background.
Thank you. You're making this easy for Mike.
Yeah, I would just like to see some consistency. So
Yeah.
I'm open to it.
And I agree with that. And I think that's what Angela's advocating for as well. So.
Yeah, and I think once we have that list, what I might do is when we come for the, as you recall, every once in a while, we have to come with the updates from OCCA, and whatever month that particular update month falls on, or we decide it should fall on, I will bring all of the policies that have this particular list to you and say, we're going to change it to put in the decided upon list.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. So Angela, it sounded as if you have additional questions.
Yeah, well, on that particular policy, I still don't like the language that precludes giving preference for admission to the college based on that list. I understand the open access concept. I just don't feel like that language is necessary, and it sort of sends the wrong message in my mind.
Do we actually give preference to anyone? I mean, it's the community's college, right? If you can pay tuition, you can come. Is that?
It's a very good question. I'm going to ask Dawn to maybe come up and answer that question for Lane.
We do not, but I would maybe give it some consideration around athletics, just to keep it in there to maybe ensure that we're not giving preference to student athletes to come to Lane, but we don't deny admission or give preference in any way in our process.
We do have some select enrollment programs.
Yes.
Nursing, dental hygiene, select others are limited enrollment programs that do have an application process. They do not give preference based on any of these categories, but they do have a list of requirements that students must meet through that application process. And it is a competitive process for admission into those specific programs.
Programmatic admission, but not admission to the institution.
I'm looking for some guidance from my colleagues. Does this policy need more work? I'm feeling like we're spending an inordinate amount of time on one policy. What I'd like to do is move us right along. And it sounds to me as if this needs more work. I'm not sure we're ready to put it into the consent agenda until we can satisfy some of these concerns. So why don't we remove this one from consideration in the consent agenda for January 4, and give Mike plenty of time to deal with the concerns that Angela's raised, come back with language that may be more consistent with what our practices are at the college.
We'll do that. Thank you, Chair Pryor.
That work? Okay, Angela, next one.
OCCA BP 5015. This one just seems really thorough and detailed. It feels like it's too far into the weeds for us. I understand based on my questions in advance that this is within our scope to write into policy, although it feels like it toes the line to me, but feelings are not necessarily all that valuable here. I guess I would like to see it a little bit pared down, but it's not a hill I'm going to die on if folks don't agree with that.
And I would agree, it's fairly specific. However, when I was going over it, it was difficult for me to pull out any of the language, as I felt like it was fairly important to each category that it be there, but certainly would be willing to, if Trustee Van Kraus wants to pare it down, I'm happy to look at that and give my impressions of what's left.
It says that although this policy is recommended, it's up to us to determine if it's applicable and if we even want to do this policy. Do we want this policy?
If you're asking me, I don't want this policy.
Okay, we have one board member who objects to having this policy at all. Comments from other board members? Lisa?
Yes. Are we basically simply restating Oregon statutory requirements here? Or, because I see this policy is legally advised, insert state law requirements for student residency determination. So, if we're simply restating state law requirements, no, we're not.
No, ours is far broader than state law requirements. The problem with, if you're a state lawmaker, you're making these rules for not only community colleges, but also universities, and so the state law requirements for residency are far different between community colleges and universities. So ours is an expansion of state law.
I guess I understand the necessity for determining residency to be as complex as it is, considering we have to delineate in district, out of district, special circumstances. So I understand the need for the detail in this policy. Considering that it is not legally advised, and that I'm assuming we have this as a practice within the institution, I don't feel strongly that we need it as a policy. I'm also not opposed to having it as a policy.
I have a clarifying question. I thought we were talking about 50-10 now. Did we not move on to that?
No, that was the first one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay, sorry.
we're on 50-50.
Sorry.
Which is the second one.
So we're talking about 50-15.
Yeah.
Steve?
Well, Lisa, just to follow up, you said that this one is not legally advised?
So I said, even though it is
Oh,
legally
sorry,
advised.
I'm with you now.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think one way, if you wanted to get rid of the detail, you could just have the last sentence. It could just say the president shall enact procedures to assure that residence determinations are made in accordance with state laws and regulations. And you'd have to change the last two, it would end at regulations.
I like it personally. Angela, you like it too. Colleagues, does that work for you? As a revision? Simplifies it significantly.
can I ask where else this information is provided?
It's in the website. If
It is.
you search, I think enrollment. Yeah, enrollment.
I don't need it stated.
So can we move this one forward to January 4 with the revision that Mike has proposed?
Actually, just to follow.
Steve?
Sorry, Mike, just another question for you. When I see that something is legally advised, I take that pretty seriously. I'm like, that seems like a good thing, but I'm not a lawyer. Maybe we ought to do that. And I'm also, all fully in support of simplicity to the point that it makes sense. And I don't want, but I want to make sure that we're getting from you your best legal advice, because you're also in the position where some of us are saying, hey, can we strike this and move that and and you're trying to accommodate, or perhaps you are. But we also want to know, hey, are we getting ourselves into any, trouble by overly simplifying this or striking complicated sentences out, right? We want to hear that too.
Yeah, I don't think we are. I mean, when you look at the OCCA version, it just basically says insert Board of Education requirements, which there aren't any currently. So this would just be, allowing the Board of Education delegating to the president to come up with whatever the college's requirements are going to be, and how we're going to define in district, out of district, or non-resident, whatever you want to call that type of tuition. So I don't think this one particularly is any issue. Just having it very simply delegating to the president to make sure there are procedures out there that define this. And we have those, as I said, they're already on the website. And it looks just very similar to what this language that we might be taking out is. Okay, I think it's pretty clear.
So do we have
I'm fine then.
consensus? Okay, so we're revising that when we're moving it forward to the consent agenda. Board members, we're about 10 minutes past the amount of time we budgeted for a policy review at this meeting. And so I'm unsure of how the board would like to continue. Angela?
I feel that given that our primary role is budget and policy, that it's worth it to spend the time on policy. But if we wanted to move these to a later discussion, I'd be fine with that. I'm not comfortable with moving the rest of them just to the consent agenda, that I have a number of additional questions.
So what you're saying is, given the questions you have about the rest of the policies that have been presented to the board for consideration tonight, you're not supportive of moving any of them forward to January 4?
No, sorry. I have additional questions about 7335. I think that other ones, my advanced questions suffice. I don't need to bring any more items up on those, but 7335, I still want to argue with Michael a little more.
So would board members be supportive of investing 10 more minutes in this policy review this evening?
Sure.
Okay. Could you share your questions with us?
Sure, thank you. I know it's folly to argue with an attorney, but here we go. So 7335, this policy proposal, I know that it's currently practiced to use pre-employment medical exams for the public safety department. This policy seems to sort of expand that to wherever it is determined necessary. I guess I'm just concerned that this language isn't tight enough to prevent misuse. When I read policies, I think, how could somebody who is perfectly reasonable but disagrees with me on core values use this policy in a way that I might disagree with? And so I think that there's too much opportunity for that in this policy language. I don't think it's tight enough. So that's where I am on this policy. I know, Michael, you've replied already, so.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that statement. I disagreed with the idea of not having this policy. If we want to tighten the language up to restrict the college's ability to require a physical examination prior to employment, I'm fine with that. I would hope that the college would only do this when that examination was required for the safety of not only the employee, but the other employees and the students and potentially the public that are on the grounds. So I would be happy to talk about tightening up the language for sure.
So questions from other board members, comments? I actually have a different point of view. I don't want to limit the administration's ability to make a determination about positions of employment at the college that where it may be appropriate that candidates do successfully complete a medical examination before coming to work for the college. I don't feel like I'm in a position as a board member to determine what those positions are. I support the idea that public safety positions are subject to this requirement, but it could be the case that at some point in the future, there are positions of employment at the college where having a successfully completed medical evaluation would be an appropriate step. I don't want to weigh into that. To me, that's an administrative
a determination, not particularly a policy one, especially if it just says that the president shall establish administrative procedures related to medical examinations. I'm satisfied that that's, and I have faith in the administration, past and present, to make that determination. So I just have a slightly different, I'm satisfied with this policy personally. Other comments from other board members? Steve?
I think I would largely echo Rosie's perspective. I would trust our president, our administration. I don't have a reason not to. I understand how other institutions have gotten themselves in trouble with these things, but I don't have a concern that that's our issue. If and when it became a concern for our issue, for our institution, I think it would bubble up to the board and we would then, take action as needed. But until such time, I'm sort of happy with things as they are. And I can see that there would be times and places where a medical evaluation is required.
Lisa, Holly, any other comments? Holly?
But this policy doesn't specify, so medical can be anything. Is that mental? Is that physical? I do see physical somewhere in there. And I understand for public safety, that probably would be a good area or group of folks who would need to undergo a medical examination. But is this just open to the president to suggest a medical examination, a mental examination for some position? I mean, it's just very vague in this policy. Is it specific to public safety or is it for anybody in a higher position? And where's mental health? Is it just physical? Is it just a broad annual physical examination? What kind? It's kind of vague. What kind of examination are they looking for, and for what segment of the new hire? It's kind of confusing.
If you look at the sentence of the first sentence of the second paragraph, it says the procedures may require any employee to undergo a physical or mental examination where such a fitness for duty exam is job related and consistent with business necessity.
So is that picking and choosing whoever they feel they need, or is it everybody who gets hired in one of those positions?
Yeah, you'd have a procedure that would apply to everybody in that, whatever that position is. So if you were saying that your public safety officers all have to take have to have a physical exam to make sure that they're able to perform the duties of their job, then all of them would, even if they were, it wouldn't matter who they would all have to have a physical exam to make sure that they were able to do whatever it is that they needed to do for their job.
Is this listed in job announcements and descriptions that you may undergo in every job on the campus? In every announcement that you may have to undergo? Is this something that's out there like that in the HR language?
It's part of the public safety postings. We don't currently require these exams for other positions. So
okay, that makes sense, but I don't see that saying specific to public safety. So is it not? And we're going to pick and choose, the president can pick and choose whoever?
This particular policy does allow the president to add or subtract a group of employees to which the policy would apply. So if, for example, there was another group of employees that needed to, lift a certain amount of weight and you wanted to make sure they were physically able to do that without hurting themselves, then there could be a procedure put into place for that group to have a medical exam as well. Currently, it's only public safety.
Okay, but that's not announced in their job description in every.
Yeah, it is in the job description, yes, but not any others because they don't need to have a examination, just public safety. So in other words, it's not in every job posting, just public safety job postings.
And if the question is whether or not this policy could be applied arbitrarily, the answer would be no, it would not be applied arbitrarily.
So Angela, do you have a?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to say I don't think that there was a accusation of any kind, but I do want to be really clear that my perspective on policy is not one of a lack of trust in individuals. My perspective on policy is that it is irrespective of the individuals who are administering the policy, and that we should be really clear about the language that we use so that it doesn't matter who is administering the policy. It's very clear what the intention is. So having said that, my concern with this policy is not that it exists or that it is used properly. My concern is that it seems to me like it's possible that there could be a situation where perhaps the medical examination is outcomes from that medical examination are used in a way that is not appropriate or that was not intended and was not specifically prohibited by policy. So my concern is that there's an opportunity for this policy to be wielded in a way that is not consistent with the intention. And that's why I would like to see tighter language.
Lisa?
So I'd like to make a suggestion that, based on the fact that not all board members are present tonight, that as we are moving some of the other policies in this group to go forward for future discussion, that perhaps we could pull this one to review it again, and that perhaps we could direct legal counsel to investigate some potential opportunities for language change. I don't know what they would be, but
I'm not sure.
or we can just discuss it again when we have everybody here.
Can I just take a little straw poll, since we don't make formal decisions in work sessions? How many members of the board would be supportive of just taking this one off the list and bringing it back around when we're all present and can discuss it as a group? Okay, that's what we'll do then. And it sounds like, Angela, did I understand correctly that you're content with moving the balance of policies forward to the consent agenda?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And is that the case for the rest of my colleagues tonight? The remaining policies can come on the as consent agenda. Perfect. Okay, I want to make sure that we have clarity before we move on. And Angela's right. Reviewing policy is one of the primary responsibilities of this Board of Education. So it's important to take the time we need to take. Steve, did you have your hand up?
I did, yeah. Just a general comment, not on any of the specifics from this evening, and I agree, right? This is a process we have to go through. I do wonder though, if it would be more efficient to, first run this through a subcommittee, comprised of folks from the board, but also meeting with Mike, perhaps with Shane. I'm not sure precisely who from the staff, in addition to those two. So, and then to share with the full board, we might get through these faster. We might kind of deliberate through and through whatever kinds of various perspectives there are faster. And if we had a presentation to the full board that said, these 2 or 3 members of the board plus these members of the staff review these and are making these recommendations now to the full board, we might get better results and move quicker. And having said that, I don't want to be on that subject.
Why did we know that was coming? When I worked at the end of my career in the world of finance, it's as heavily regulated, certainly, as this one. And the board that I served at that time did indeed have a subcommittee process for reviewing policies on a monthly basis and making adjustments to them, and then recommending those adjustments or edits or unedited and approved policies to the full board. And it was a pretty darn efficient process. We've tried subcommittees in the past, this board has, and we've sort of cycled back around and said, it sounds like everybody wants to be involved. So
Not this one.
We'll let this subcommittee go, and we'll do a committee of the whole process again. But, maybe we could talk about that at one of our upcoming meetings and find out, we've got changes coming, we know, in the makeup of this board in the spring, and perhaps that next group of people are going to want to do things differently. Yes, Steve.
But just as a follow-up, and I don't mean that as a, way to shirk the responsibility. This is really honestly suggested as much in support of those who really want to dig into this, because my guess is they're feeling pressure to move on because every other people are
Yeah.
suggesting and signaling we move on, but this is something that requires time.
Yeah.
And with a group of 3 or 4, it's going to get the much closer attention and the time it requires. So I think there's value all the way around.
And there's nothing wrong with looking at more efficient ways to do our work. So, Lisa.
For the sake of the conversation, I'm just going to say I'm not in favor of that idea. I think it's really important that the policies come to the entire board, and that the entire board gets to have a conversation, the opportunity to see the original policy, give feedback and discuss it. And when we have had those subcommittees in the past, that they actually were not successful. Because the work that the subcommittee did would come to the entire board, and then it seemed like the conversations were actually being dragged out longer. And so, because for whatever reason, it was like then the back and forth between the subcommittee and the people who are seeing it for the first time seemed to extend the conversation. So I actually think it's really healthy for us to have robust conversations as a board, to think about things together as a board. But perhaps, I know we want to try and get through these policies, but perhaps bringing fewer so that we have the time to really look at them critically and not feel pressured to move some ahead because they're in front of us. So it's just an opinion.
All right, I think we're going to, oh, Angela, did you have another? Oh, okay. We're going to move on. Thank you for this work this evening, everyone on the board. We're going to move to the long-term facilities master plan and deferred maintenance. President Bolger.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to ask Jennifer Hayward to come to the podium. These are annual reports that we provide to the board, and Jennifer is well prepared and gave you some information to preview.
Thank you. Brett, could I do the deferred maintenance one first? The other one first. Sorry. So, board, thank you for being here tonight to listen to my annual deferred maintenance report. Next slide. Like President Bolger mentioned, I gave a similar report in November 2021. So this is an update, but just as a refresher, in 2017, LCC conducted a facilities conditions assessment, and we hired an engineering company to do this. And it's an engineering company that does these assessments for hundreds of colleges and universities nationwide. And part of the service that they do is they create an online database that we refer to even today, 5 years later, that includes all of our facilities, assets, the replacement costs and dates of replacements needed, and the estimated lifespan of all the assets. And those assets include everything in a building or on a building, from the paint on the walls, the carpet, the toilets, the elevators, the HVAC system, the roofs, just practically everything you can think of. And the database automatically adjusts every year. So the amount of deferred maintenance or maintenance needed in the present year or the future year increases every year because of inflation, and 2, because new assets every year reach the end of their life and are added to the deferred maintenance or the present year list. And then at the same time, the cost of deferred maintenance decreases annually because of the investments that the college makes from the bond and from the college general fund. But they don't increase within that database. I keep a separate tally and I decrease those on my own, just so you know how that works. Next slide. So given those two factors that I just explained, the current building related deferred maintenance backlog is $80 million. And that doesn't include things not and are attached to a building. So it doesn't include parking lots, athletic fields, exterior hardscapes, or infrastructure like water piping between buildings. So the 2020 bond, as you know, is making a big contribution towards reducing the deferred maintenance backlog. The Building 6 roof and the Florence major maintenance projects are two things that we've already done that have reduced it. We're also going to be demolishing about 75% of Building 12, and that is one of the buildings that's in the worst shape on campus. So that'll make a huge dent in that backlog too. And then our last major project is the science lab upgrade and major maintenance on that building. So that'll take a big slice out of it. And then other deferred maintenance items that are being completed by the bond that won't impact that particular $80 million because there are things outside buildings are the track resurfacing, the turf field replacements, and the parking lot maintenance. So in the facilities industries, we talk about facilities conditions. We use a metric called Facilities Conditions Needs Index, which is a calculation of your 10-year renewal needs. So what that means is you take all of your deferred maintenance, so that $80 million, and you add everything that you're going to need to do this year and in the next 10 years. So you take all of that together and then you divide it by the current replacement value of all of your buildings. And for LCC, and then that's just a way to talk about in general, the general condition of your building. So for LCC, ours is 0.25, and that's in the fair category. The higher the number, the worse your condition. And the lower the number, the better your condition. So, new buildings are close to 0, and buildings that are in such bad repair that they should probably just be torn down are close to 1. So LCC is about in the middle, a little better. Better than around average. Next slide. So for funding for deferred maintenance as a way to keep that number in the good to better category, and to keep your deferred maintenance backlog from continuing to grow, experts recommend annually budgeting 2 to 4% of the current replacement value of your buildings for maintenance and repair every year. And those experts are shown in the end note there. And I'll just mention APPA is the premier kind of educational facilities association. And I'll be mentioning them in a future slide. So I just wanted to point them out now. And Steve, I think at the last meeting, you had asked me to present about recommendations from organizations. So I wanted to acknowledge that I included it in here. So that 2 to 4% won't take care of your deferred maintenance backlog. They'll just take care of what you need to do today and going forward, as that's budgeted annually. And APPA further breaks down that 2 to 4% into how much you should devote to maintenance and operations. So operations and maintenance, and that includes like my salary, my staff salaries, the preventative maintenance that we do every year, and then minor repairs that we do on a daily basis. And then the amount that you should, of that 2 to 4% that you should put towards major maintenance, which includes any replacement of a facilities asset over $10,000, but it could be anything from just a $10,000 carpet replacement in this building to a multi-million-dollar HVAC replacement. All of that's included within the major maintenance category. So let's calculate this out for Lane. Lane has almost $1 billion in building assets as of now, and that has increased quite a bit over the last few years because of inflation. So when you calculate out the 2% that we would want to fund maintenance and repair, that equals about between 19 million and 38 million, with about 5 million to 14 million going to the operations and maintenance, and 14 to 23 million going to the major maintenance. And LCC and FY22 funded maintenance and repair through the general fund. This isn't including bond funds and other state grants at a rate of 0.45%, which is a little bit less than a quarter of the recommended 2%, with 0.38% going to operations and maintenance and 0.07% going to major maintenance. Next slide. So here's just kind of the history of how LCC has funded major maintenance over the last several years. Prior to the bond passing, it was in the about $1 million to $2.5 million range. And now since the bond is passed, it's decreased to 700 to about 500,000. And then this slide is pretty confusing. And Angela sent me several good questions. Thank you about it, which I think you all got. And so hopefully it's more understandable now. And so I'll just go through quickly. The first kind of set of bar graphs show LCC's data on facilities expenditure per GIE stands for gross institutional expenditure. So that's facilities expenditure as a percentage of the total college budget over the years of FY 17, 18, and 19. And the reasons why we don't have 20 and 21 in here, LCC did fill out the survey for those years, but the organization who compiles the survey is APPA. Again, I mentioned them before. They changed their survey platform and it's in a beta mode now. So they don't have all of this data loaded for the last 2 years, but hopefully we'll get it in the graph form soon. But anyways, that's kind of an unimportant aside, but just wanted to show that compared to our comparators, LCC is funding facilities at about half as much. And those kind of other chunks of the bar graph are different types of comparators. So I won't go through what each of them is because I kind of explained that in the email, but the Carnegie Class Associate is the other community colleges that filled out the survey. The public is the other public institutions that filled out the survey. So those are those buckets. Okay, and my last slide is that my recommendation for the future funding of major maintenance is to set the baseline level of funding at 2 million and to increase that over several years as enrollment increases and as it becomes more feasible to 5 million, and then to rely on a regular influx of bond funds to cover the remaining about $9 million a year needed, which hopefully, thanks to the board and many others who helped pass the bond, we'll be able to continue doing that into the future. So that's all. Thank you. And I guess I'll pause here for questions and then I can do my other short report.
Questions from board members? Just an observation from me. Lane has never budgeted 5 million in the 12 years I've been on this board, much to my dismay. I mean, I do worry about Lane's infrastructure and the deterioration. But however, I have to say, seeing that $80 million number feels like a lower number than it was when we went into the bond campaign. So I feel a little encouraged that we are making a dent in our deferred maintenance nut. Thank you. Good report. Yes,
just have
Lisa.
one clarification about that. Thank you. So that $80 million number, when you talk about the upcoming projects that will further reduce deferred maintenance, that's not a little over 19 million. So does that bring down the 80 million?
Well, except for,
Except that each year, right?
Yes.
In the current state of the clock of the world that we're in this moment. So I agree with Rosie, this has been an ongoing conversation for a long time. I think it's an important one to keep having, but I do feel like we are making progress, and thank you for your diligence on that. I had one more question. I'm curious about that facilities conditions need index. And what I recall is we were actually lower on that scale previously. We were certainly not better, but maybe in 2017 or even 2019, do you recall where we were at on the scales index?
I don't, I'm sorry. And if you told me you were going to ask me that question, I'm sorry. I can, if it's okay, I can let President Bolger know and she can.
Sure. I'm
to
just curious. I mean, I appreciated the information that you provide. I mean, I always forget like this is something that is a moving target constantly and then with inflation as well. So, but thank you for the report.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes, Steve?
But thanks for the presentation. This is for me really useful information. We had a discussion last month or somewhere in there about kind of budget conditions that the board wants to set going into budget season. And that's sort of a new-ish thing that we're trying to put there at the outset to increase the board's influence over the budget at the outset when we have some opportunity to do so. So I just take this recommendation to heart. We're being asked, to set a minimum threshold of, I think you said 2 million a year. That's the minimum. And even that was, I think that would only hit the bottom, right, of that 2 to 4%.
Not even. I mean,
Even
that's
less
the
than-
2 million plus bond funds.
So, yeah, I mean, I just sort of take that to heart and hope that fellow board members willing to support that recommendation. I certainly am. All we do by putting these things off is just make it extremely difficult for a future board to keep the college on track. So I for one, am very much in support of maintaining that as a minimum threshold of our budget expectation.
Did we have that number on the list when we discussed budget parameters last month?
I don't recall that there was an actual dollar figure attached to that, but we did have deferred maintenance in those parameters.
How about colleagues' response to Steve's suggestion that the board embrace this proposed minimum number as one of our budget parameters going forward? I am in support personally. I see Holly. Angela?
I think generally I agree. I think it's as I recall, this is an area where I guess I'm just not clear enough on the process of how the budget recommendation is tweaked before it arrives to us, and what discussions and negotiations sort of go on in the budget development subcommittee. So I think it seems like it would be helpful if we express our support for this budget parameter. I'm still not clear whether that will result in a budget coming to us that has this minimum parameter. So I guess I need to understand the process before it gets to us a little bit better.
Lisa?
Yeah, so I believe we've always set parameters for the budget, and so that's not a new part of the process. A good example would be tuition. And so I guess I mean, this is certainly a big concern for me, but I can't, one, make this decision in isolation of all the other variables. And two, there are 2 board members that are not with us tonight. And I think this is a great conversation to be having, and I hope it comes back to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, and I disagree a little bit with the points that you've made, Lisa. On the one hand, we're encouraged to set a compensation and benefits parameter, but there seems to be some reluctance about setting a major maintenance and ongoing maintenance parameter. To me, they're the same kind of guidelines and guardrails that the board ought to be expressing to the administration with respect to budget making. My experience over the years has been that once the budget building begins in earnest and it becomes apparent that there may be some budget gap to close, that this is the first sacrifice that gets made in the proposed budget. And I guess I find that challenging, because that's what's caused this number to grow to the proportion that it has over the 50 years of the college's history, and why it was so important to get that bond support to help where it can begin to make a dent in that deferred maintenance. I mean, we can't have, you know, we've had major issues with buildings out here over the years. So
I'm
Lisa.
sorry, maybe I didn't speak clearly. I support the idea of the board setting parameters, and Dr. Bolger said that this was one of the parameters that we discussed being included. I just wasn't ready to like have this like all conclusive decision about attaching a number to it tonight.
Even though we did to compensation and benefits.
Well, I just think it's worth having another conversation. I don't quite understand how we make a decision about those parameters. I mean, is it going to be brought back for a vote? I mean, I know on like tuition, we bring it for a full board vote. And then there aren't two board members here tonight.
Well, this is just a work session.
Yeah, we're just having a conversation.
Yeah, we're not making any decisions
Yeah.
here this evening. I think the suggestion I heard was we should be as clear to the budget building team in the organization about our expectations around funding, maintenance and operations, facilities operations, as we are about the guidelines we set for compensation and benefits and other budget items like tuition. So any other board member comments about the deferred maintenance report? Excellent report. Thank you. Really appreciate it. I'm not seeing any, so we're ready to move on.
So my next report is pretty short. I gave a fairly long and detailed presentation on the facilities master plan a year ago in November 2021. So if you want a refresher on that, I would encourage you to click through those slides. And also on the URL here is a link to the actual facilities master plan. But just updates on our implementation. Next slide. Wanted to let you know what items are being taken care of in the 2020 bond with the from the facilities master plan. And I won't go through and talk about these one by one. I'll just talk about a couple things that are different since my report a year ago, perhaps. Obviously, you know about Building 12. I don't think I need to talk about that because you know the history of what happened with that and why we decided to build a new building and to demolish most of that building. But I will note that the master plan dedicated around 10 million, or proposed around $10 million to be spent on science lab upgrades and deferred maintenance in Building 16. We are now planning with the bond to increase that amount for a few reasons. One is because the science labs are just extremely old and extremely not up to current educational standards. They really need a lot of help. And the building also has a huge deferred maintenance backlog, and it's one of the most used buildings by students. And there's an efficiency, a cost savings with once you get a contractor into a building to do as much as possible at one time, rather than kind of doing half now and then half maybe 10 years later when you pass another bond. So we are proposing to increase what we plan to do in that building with the master plan. And then the same happened with Florence. We did more of the deferred maintenance at the Florence Center than we had originally proposed doing in the master plan. And again, the reason is that once you hire a contractor and you mobilize them and our staff to go out to Florence, it just made sense to do more of that work at one time rather than to do half of it now and half of it again in 10 years when it's all needed now. So there was that thing. And then next slide. These are things that you've heard about and that are ongoing and in alignment with the master plan. I will note that we're continuing to look into our under the category of climate action plan sustainability into the 1.5% for green energy technology, like we talked about in a board meeting a few months ago. So those are still the things that we're doing. And this was just a short presentation, and Tom's here in case you have more detailed questions, but that's it.
Comments, questions from board members? Steve?
But just since you brought it up, Jennifer, the 1.5%, can you just remind me, I think what, you know, the rule or the law, whatever says, you know, for solar, we're thinking that might not be the best investment in this particular climate. And, you know, and that our goal is to sort of support the spirit of that law by doing something else that achieves a similar goal, just not that particular technology. Is that roughly the thing that
That's what we talked about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's still the plan. But we're at the moment, we're focusing on our big projects, health professions, iTech, wrapping up Florence, and we haven't quite dug into doing a lot of planning for that project yet.
Other comments, questions from board members? I'm wondering if at some point in the future, maybe in mid-23, we might have an update on the master plan itself. I mean, we built it several years ago now. We built it before we went out for the bond. And I'm interested to know, how are we doing? How much of it have we accomplished? Are we evolving it in any way to change based on our more current experience or whatever? So,
Kind of like an outline of what we said we were going to do and what we've done. And
really, yeah. That's kind of what I was slightly more interested in, not only what we've heard tonight, but in addition, just the overall master facilities plan. How are we doing with that plan and implementing it and bringing it to fruition? So it doesn't have to be January. It can be sometime in the future.
Thank you. We'll make sure that the board receives a report on that.
Okay. But both reports really well done. Thank you so much for the update.
Thank you.
I think we're ready to move on. And the next item on the agenda I'm looking at is new programs, bachelor's degree. Dr. Boulder.
Yes, sure. Well, Grant Matthews is at the podium, and we're pleased to present to you a couple of new programs. And I think we have some guests here who are going to be talking with you as well.
All right, Chair Pryor, members of the board, President Bolger, thank you for the opportunity to share new programs with you tonight. Chair Pryor, with your permission, I would like to change the order that we present them in. We have some students here with us tonight, and I'd like to get them through first so that they can get home. So the first program that we're going to be presenting is a new Associates of Applied Science and Career Pathway Certificate in Machining and Inspection. If you'll recall, in January of this year, at the recommendation of administration, this board approved the suspension of our machining program, our machining Associates of Applied Science, in favor of exploring what a new updated curriculum would look like. We have, as promised, since that time been exploring the opportunities and options. We have hired a new faculty member, and that faculty member, Charles Nichols, has been busy actually since he started right before classes started in September, and he has been feverishly working both teaching classes as well as updating the facility and preparing a new curriculum for your review tonight. I'm going to turn the time over to him to explain more about the program. Again, this is so that you will be able to ask questions and understand it in preparation for being able to approve it at the business meeting next month so that it can move on to the state for degree and certificate approval. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Charles Nichols.
Welcome.
Hello, members of the board, President Bolger. My name is Chuck Nichols. I'm the new faculty here for the manufacturing program. I'm just going to speak for a little bit about what we're doing with this program, the changes that we're doing here. Pretty much what we're doing is modernizing everything that we're doing here. Our old program was, great for when we were back in the 80s and 90s, but as times have moved forward, as technology has changed, so is manufacturing. We don't do a lot of the things that we used to do anymore. There's better ways to do this. And out in industry, we're doing those things now. So the new program is all based around what are we actually doing out in industry now and what we're going to be doing in the future. We've built this program as a 2-year program. So then we can have that associate's degree for my students there. But then we've also built in that 1-year career pathway certificate. So then, a lot of my students are going to end up getting jobs right away. I have a different company coming into the school every week asking for machinists from this program. Anywhere from 2 to 15 people they're looking to hire right now on the spot. So this program is for that. We're moving away from the hand cranking of machines and standing there working at one machine the whole time. Now we're doing a lot more programming, CAD, CAM work. How do you actually make a 3D model of the part that you're trying to make? How do you create a cutting program for those things? And then how do you actually create that part and then inspect that part? How do you know that part is actually correct? These are a lot of things that major industry players are doing all over the world right now. Companies like Boeing, who are going to be out here next term to see our program, they're doing all CNC manufacturing. They've moved away from what we've done in the past. And so we're going to be aligning ourselves with what industry is doing now. Our goal for this program, my long-term goal for this is that we will do this 2-year program to start with, and then expand that down the road too. Laws have recently changed that allow us to do a 4-year program at this school. And my long-term program is to create that. Nowhere in the country can you do a bachelor's in CNC machining. It doesn't exist because we've never been allowed to do it before. And so that is kind of the long-term goal of this program. Every term, these students will be hands-on actually making parts. I've been visiting a lot of schools to see what they're doing with their curriculum right now. There's a lot of theoretical work. What would it look like if we made this part? Or what would you think about that? But instead, these students will be making those parts. One of our big goals for this program is that we will no longer buy recruiting material. They will be made in-house by these students. We're a manufacturing program. We should be making all of our own stuff. And that's what they should be doing there. Our main goal for every year is going to be a different genre of machining. So the first year of this program is what's called 2-axis lathe and 3-axis mill. What that refers to is what kind of motions can the machine do? How complicated is the machine? And then at the end of every year, they're going to have a project term. So just like it is out in real industry, I'm just going to have a table of parts. I'm going to tell these students, pick 2, you have 3 weeks, go. Make these parts, no prints, nothing else, just a physical part. When I was working my own machine shop right before I was hired for this job, that's what I was doing in industry a lot. Companies would come to me like Gyra Semiconductor is a good example. They make computer chips up in Portland. All their equipment, it's all custom made. You can't buy parts for those off the shelf. They just don't exist. So they come to me, I need 20 of these by Friday. Can you make this? And a lot of times that part's broken. There's no prints. You have to figure out every little bit of that. So their training is going to be that real world example. If I have this part, how do I make this? How do I reverse engineer this? Measure every little part of that. Make a 3D model. Make a cutting program for that. Set up the machines to actually cut these parts. Cut the parts. Inspect the parts. Make an inspection report under strict deadlines. And then as that final term goes, that time that they're going to have is going to be reduced and reduced and reduced. And their final, the end of every year, 1 part, 1 day. By the end of business, I need another one of these. Go. So that'll be the first year. And then the second year, we'll move on to more advanced machining. There'll be 3- and 4-axis lathe work, and then 4- and 5-axis mill work. It's much more for like aerospace kind of companies, dental, a lot of medical stuff is done in that way. Just things that we just weren't teaching here before. And a lot of schools in the state of Oregon aren't teaching yet. It's my opinion that we as a school should be not only where industry is, but ahead of industry. we should be leading industry. So when these students leave here, when they go work for any company that's around here, they're the leaders at that job and can move that company forward with the times and increase industry here in Eugene and the local Lane area. Before I let students talk about the direction of the program, do you have questions about what we're doing with this program? What our goals are, what's happening with this program?
Steve.
Well, first off, I just want to say, I'm so glad you're here. This sounds fantastic. I just want to ask you a couple of personal questions. So you're new, just
yes.
to Lane. What drew you here?
Well, I live in the area. I live out in Dexter. My story is kind of a interesting roundabout story. I did my undergraduate degree here at the University of Oregon for a tuba performance. I was a musician first. And then I joined the U.S. Army as a musician. I was a tuba player for the Army, was stationed overseas for a long time. Most of my manufacturing started with music stuff. I actually built my own tubas while I was in the Army. I didn't have the funds to buy brand new tubas, and the instruments that we had in my Army band were not good. So all the best instruments are made over in Germany. And I just happened to live down the street from Master French horn builder. So that's kind of how I started into that manufacturing field. And then I was injured while I was overseas, was medically retired out of the Army. So after that, I started working for a British company called Wessex Tubas. I designed and manufactured all of their instruments. I was in charge of their factory. It was a 1.5 million square foot factory. The company was based in England, but then the factory itself was in China. So every 6 weeks for 10 days, I was over there working, modernizing that facility, changing the processes of how we're doing the work there, inspection work of our products that we were making there, designing the new products. So everything that that company made, except for 2 instruments from 2016 to 2021 was all my work. I have instruments being played in the Chicago Symphony right now. So feel pretty good about all that work. When COVID hit, I couldn't travel anymore. So I was laid off from that work. And I started my own machine shop, Nichols Custom Brass Work, right out in Dexter, about 10 minutes from here, just down 58. And I was making parts for either the music industry or a lot of semiconductor work. You know, supporting the computer chip manufacturers is a big line of work there. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of tight tolerance parts, you know, no prints. Never once have I gotten a blueprint from a company like that. You know, here's the thing, can you make this? And I knew that this job was opening up. I actually used my GI Bill to do the old program that was here. I did the 1-year certificate that used to be here. So I knew this was opening up. And for me, when I was in the Army, I was a non-commissioned officer, a sergeant. And, you know, we were leaders of soldiers and the ones that would actually train soldiers. And I liked that work. I was good at that work. And I kind of miss getting to do that work. And so I get to do that now. I get to create the next generation of machinists here, which we desperately need here in America. So I look at this as a very long-term job for me. And this is a legacy kind of job. What kind of legacy can I create here in Lane? You know, each one of these students is going to go out and work somewhere and build something and change lives. You know, I look around this room and I can see, you know, all these things that were made by CNC machinists. You know, the frames for all your laptops were made by CNC machinists. All the plastic things that you see in this room, all the molds for that made by CNC machinists. The cars that you drove to get here, CNC machinists made all that. And so now I get to help these young people join that field and make a difference in the world. So that's kind of my background and how I got here tonight.
That is fantastic. Grant, did you hire this guy? Congratulations. This is fantastic. Yeah. Yeah.
Was in charge of that search.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah.
This is the kind of stuff that I think the board loves to hear. I certainly do. And I'm very appreciative. I hope you'll invite us to that final when we get to see the students' parts.
Our plan is to have a couple of events this year. We have our Trades Expo. We'll be doing a big event for that. We're actually planning for my shop to have an open house probably the end of January into February. Boeing is coming down here from Washington to see this program because, you know, they want machinists too. Every place in America needs machinists. And so having a big company like that, I want to have that open house the same time they're here. So then all the students from campus are coming in, seeing what's happening. There's a lot of big changes that are happening with that machine shop. Equipment wise, we've been moving out stuff that just doesn't work or is dated is a good way to put it. A lot of equipment in there straight from the 70s, 60s. We're moving out a lot of that stuff to bring in new equipment. I've gotten a little bit over $250,000 worth of equipment for this program this term. Making space as we speak right now for equipment that's going to be showing up before the end of the year. Industry is excited, getting the change that we need there. We have to lead industry, and now that's the goal for that. So we're getting donations, we're getting people involved from the community again. And it's been a lot of work.
So that was going to be my question. I mean, it's exciting to think that Boeing is coming to look. How are we communicating what you're doing to the whole business community, manufacturing community right here in Lane County?
Yeah, so I've been working on building a new advisory committee for this program here. That's part of the work that I need to do for the associate's degree to put that forward. I've got international companies and I've got local companies. There's Voight Machinery, local in town. Sierra Pacific is on this board now, but then I've got, Mastercam, one of the big CAD CAM developers. I've got Mitutoyo, which is the world premier Japanese metrology company. Haas Automation is now on board for this. So it's been a lot of work getting it there. I've only been here since September. So putting in the work to get that there. But yeah, our plan is to have that first advisory committee meeting next term, so that we can start seeing what we need for this program. Because there's a lot of work that we have to do to make this happen for what we need for this program. But that's our goal. And that's what I'm going to push forward with.
So you wanted to bring students?
Yes, I have two of my students here. Got Matthew McCoy. He's a second-year student here. So he's finishing the current program that we had and is starting to do the new work that we're doing there. I'm probably going to have him speak first. And then I've got Alex Perry here. He's a first-year student, so he's just started this term. So I just wanted to bring in a couple students so then they could talk about the direction of this program and how they feel about the changes that we're doing here.
Great.
You want to go first, Alex?
Thank you.
Matthew?
Thank you for being here tonight.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for having me. My name is Matthew. I'm a second-year student. So I was able to do 2 semesters under Stephen Caffey. And he had a heavy manual focus with manual machining. That's what he loved to do. And the world still needs it. But I've recently started work as a manual machinist, and a lot of the practices I learned are not in play anymore. I'm even at my job, I was behind, even having started 2 semesters worth of school. Wow. So seeing the transitions Chuck's making into removing the outdated processes and streamlining into more modern tooling and more modern techniques is very exciting. It's where the industry's headed, and I think I'm very excited to see where things lead. But yeah, I think Chuck's the man for the job, and it really is time for change in the machining.
That's great.
It really is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere yet. I got a question.
Of course.
Yeah. So one of our concerns on the board is how to get you all to stay through to complete your degree, as opposed to leave after you get whatever the critical course is and somebody comes down to hire you. And I'm just curious about your thoughts on that.
I think with the way Steve was running the program, it was easier for students to go just do a manual job and learn the specific practices of that company at that point. Whereas with the CNC thing, there's a more broad scope of what manufacturing can be. And I could see that it would take more time. I would feel intimidated to go out into the CNC industry right away, whereas I wouldn't be intimidated with manual machining and turning knobs. So I think modernizing the practices is going to bring more students and keep more students through the entirety of the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Oh, excuse me. I'm also extremely excited to go through this program and going through this program. I've gone through 1 term so far, and it has been a very eye-opening experience to what things used to be and what things are going to be. I'm with Chuck every single day. It's 6 hours, 4 days a week. And he definitely has a very grand vision of moving the program into the future. I'm anxious that I'll be up to snuff, but he's definitely the person that will be able to take me through it. And the things that we are doing, the future of machining, my grandpa was a machinist, and the things that we used to do at the school are the things that he was telling me he did, when he was working, how many years ago it was. And the complexity of the future is something that we can learn for sure. Absolutely. Of course. And I'm very excited to learn it.
Yes.
So just one semester, you've got one term out of 6. Is that what it is that you've completed so far?
The current program I'm in, I am able to complete it this year.
You get up to 1 year.
I think it should be a 2-year. It's the career pathway is what I'm currently doing. And with the rate I'm going, I will finish spring term.
Well, I hope you come back in whenever it is, towards the end in May, and give us an update. How did it go? Where are you headed next? I would love to know.
What I'm planning to do actually is to come back after I'm finished with that and go with the new program that Chuck is implementing.
Awesome.
That's great. That's great to hear.
Awesome. Questions from other board members? Thank you so much for giving us your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. So just checking to see if there's any other questions, but we do look forward to your support next month on these curriculum items. So the next item is another new program. If you recall, last year, almost to the day, on December 15th, this board approved a new degree type here at Lane Community College, the Bachelor of Applied Science, and authorized the school to begin looking at Bachelors of Applied Science programs that we want to implement. And from that time, the business department has been hard at work to develop a Bachelors of Applied Science and Applied Business Management here. We've been going through that process. We've submitted through the first round of what is necessary through the state and are now beginning the last phases of this, which includes providing you with this new degree, the Bachelors of Applied Science and Business Management, that again, we're hoping to present today so that you'll be prepared to support it next month during the regular business meeting. So to provide additional details on this exciting new degree, I'd like to invite Luann Johnson and Corey Murphy up to discuss the work that they have done in preparation for this degree.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Luann Johnson, as you just heard, and this is Corey Murphy. We are faculty in the business department, and we're really excited to be here tonight. Thank you for taking the time. We're hoping to give you highlights of our proposed degree, which is a Bachelor of Applied Science in Applied Business Management. I know that's a big, long title. But truly, we're hoping by the time we're done tonight with our brief overview and giving you a chance to ask questions that you'll be just as excited as we are for Lane to offer this degree. Next slide, please. So as you know, Oregon has opened the doors for community colleges to offer Bachelors of Applied Science. And there are currently 2 business degrees in the pipeline. The first one is Chemeketa Community College. As you might already know, they have been approved. They're going to be offering a degree, a BAS in Applied Leadership and Management, and their proposed start date is fall 2024. Our degree is the second, and we are not quite approved yet, but we're hoping to get there. Our degree, again, is a BAS in Applied Business Management, and we also, if things go well, are hoping to start fall of 2024. These 2 degrees, although they may sound similar, are very, very different, just so that you know. Next slide. So we have a lot of work to do, and we can't do that without all of our faculty. And as Grant mentioned, we've been hard at work since May 2021, thinking about this degree when it was brought to us. And we didn't want to take this lightly. We aren't going to do this degree to increase enrollment, even though it will. That's not why we're doing it. We're not doing it as a money grab, even though we will get some more cash here for the college, but that's not why we're doing it. And we're certainly not doing it for, just to say that we've done it as one of the first in Oregon, because we don't care about that. What we care about is our students. And it's kind of a funny thing. We had been having this conversation probably 2 years before this opportunity came, that we're concerned about the progression of our good students and how they're going to progress in business with just a 2-year degree. For example, we have amazing accounting students, right? So they get a job in payroll or accounts payable, accounts receivable, and they do a really good job because they learned here how to do those jobs. But a couple years later, a supervisor position comes up. They're probably promoted to that position, and that's great. But their next step, the manager of that department, it is not going to happen without a 4-year degree in most places. All of us on our faculty are from private industry, and I myself have had to overlook employees who did not have a 4-year degree, who were very well qualified for the position. They just didn't have the check mark that our corporation was requiring. And some of you might say, well, why don't they just go back to get that 4-year degree? But as we know, our students don't have the money. They don't have the time, or the way that those programs are structured just don't fit into what they need. So we decided that we were in if we could make this degree work for students. So we asked ourselves lots of questions. So we asked ourselves, how do we build this degree to make sure that it's low barrier entry? How do we make sure that we include the best curriculum that's current and relevant, that's not necessarily sequential 100%, so students could come in and leave when life happens and be able to still progress appropriately? That was really important to us. It was very important that we made this affordable. And I'm sorry to say, we're not going to move forward if we had differential tuition. I don't know, can I say that out loud? So we're very grateful that we're not going there. We also wanted to make sure that our students could take our program and still do life, have their full-time job, have their family. So build it so that was appropriate, but then also thinking about the barriers of financial aid and making sure that we're still building the program so they can qualify for financial aid, which is really important for many of our students, as you well know. And lastly, so important, how do we build this so they get enough applied practice to truly make them ready as soon as they graduate? And we spent a lot of time on that and have still some more to go. We have a very short presentation today, so I'm not going to tell you all our answers to that, but I want to let you know that we answered those questions, and we are very confident in the degree that we've developed that it is good for students. And every one of us is behind it 100%, and we're super, super excited about it. So Corey's going to talk to you a little bit about our executive summary highlights and a few other things.
Yeah, thank you for having us here tonight. Kind of a tough tack to follow, Chuck, but I'll do my best. Our program, this is just an overview of the program. We have a proposal we have to submit to the HEC, and it's about 80 pages long, but these are the highlights. It's a 2+2 model, so students come in with an associate's degree already. This is a requirement of the state. We have to build our bachelor's degrees on top of existing associate degree programs. So if a student comes in with a degree in business or a degree in accounting, that student will be able to jump right into those upper level business courses, right, in our 4-year degree. However, if a student comes in with a degree in manufacturing or diesel technology or some other field, how are we going to get those students up to speed really fast so they can jump into our 3rd and 4th year curriculum in the BAS? And so we have this set of directed elective courses. that we've determined this will get students the base knowledge they need to jump into those classes if they're not a business student. And then we've structured the curriculum in a way that there will be further kind of scaffolding throughout the program for those students. And for those students who do come in with a business degree, they'll be taking courses in other areas to provide a more well-rounded education, which is important not just for education, but for being a good manager as well. There's no differential tuition, as we talked about. This is a huge strategic advantage for the program, but most importantly, it's beneficial to students. Wraparound support for those students. So we needed to make sure that we're offering all of the support services to these students, making sure that they're offered at times that will be, appropriate for students who are taking classes weekends and evenings. Finally, we had external reviewers. There's kind of a peer review process built into the state proposal process, and they were very much in support of the degree. And I'll say even in support of the degree type in general. So that's very encouraging to see partners from public universities. One of our peer reviewers was from another institution in Oregon, and they were all very supportive of this degree and of the idea in general. And then we did a survey of students recently, and it showed general support. The survey was more to find out things about preference of when classes would be offered and that sort of thing, not so much to gauge, are you excited about this degree or not? But it did show general support for the degree. Thank you. And where are we now? Well, I'll tell you, next slide. This is the process for approving a Bachelor of Applied Science degree. And
I was going to say, Mike, you should not feel so bad with the policy.
I made this, so I've probably missed some key component that's not up here. But basically, the blue boxes at the top are they're all important, but the blue boxes at the top of what have consumed most of our time over the past year. Has it been a year? We had to submit a statement of need, which basically is it kind of tells the state, hey, there's a real workforce need for this program. There's demand for students with this type of degree. They don't want us just offering whatever degree because we think it'll be good. They want to see that this degree will impart skills that are in demand and in growth fields, of which we identified business management as one of those. That was approved by HEC this summer, and now we're in the proposal process. We are pretty confident, excuse me, that HEC will approve that at their February meeting. And then there's a final kind of just check approval at the end. There's also CTE standards that have to go through through HEC's Office of Community College and Workforce Development. We're hoping that's approved at the next meeting as well. And then there are important steps like making sure students can get federal financial aid, making sure our accreditors will allow us to offer this degree, and perhaps most importantly of all, getting approval from the Board of Education. So once all of those things happen, we can offer the degree. So overall takeaway, we've spent a lot of time and a lot of thought developing this degree as a faculty with our partners on campus, enrollment services, student services, probably a bunch of people I'm forgetting. But overall, we all have the best interests of our students in mind. We think this will be a great opportunity to offer a bachelor's degree to students who otherwise would not have the opportunity to earn a bachelor's degree ever. That's the short of it. So we've gotten a lot of feedback from our industry partners. We surveyed local businesses. We've talked with our advisory group and others, and so far we've heard a lot of just really good excitement about it. All right, so this is what we're asking for. We're asking for your partnership. We're asking for your approval. And we're asking you to put us on the agenda for the January meeting and tick off that box on that nasty flow chart. But I'm sure that you have questions for us, so fire away.
So questions from the colleagues. Let the record show that Board Member Eister has joined the meeting and has a question.
Thank you, Rosie. Scott Van Pelt, author of The Great Upheaval, has done a lot of research on what community colleges can and must do in order to be successful, and distinguishing how community colleges are different from the services and the programs offered in traditional four-year colleges. And I want to commend the presenters on the outstanding job you did in hitting most of the high points that that author and researcher pointed out to us when he came to campus just a month or so ago. So you did a wonderful job with that, and I am looking forward to a highly successful program.
Thank you. Yeah. And as he talked, the current structures that are in place, we originally thought after that presentation, well, what can we get rid of? How can we change these structures? But we will hope that as we move forward and progress in the future, as the college and all of us kind of embrace some of those other ideas he brought, that we'll be able to change. But currently we are in those structures and still able to offer quite a bit of flexibility. So we're excited about that.
Comments from other board members? Steve?
Process questions. Also, thank you very much. Your present, just like the former presentations, the stuff that I'm so glad we get to hear it. So thank you for whoever's arranging these presentations from our faculty, because this is just a general comment. That as if you were listening to any of the the earlier stuff, you get a sense of some of the kinds of things that we deal with. Right, we hear a lot of things that are very stressful in terms of our financial outlook. It's really great to hear about the new programs that are coming online that'll hopefully help revitalize us and dig us out of some of the financial holes that we're in. So thank you for all of that work and the enthusiasm and the kind of the forward-looking approach that you have. My questions are, I'm supportive. So my questions are just sort of curiosities to some extent. Does the HEC is part of their job or to to balance or restrict competition amongst the 17 community colleges? And I suppose, therefore, if that's the case, then perhaps getting out first gives you some advantage there.
Please, President Bolger.
I'm not familiar with the HEC interfering in that way. I'm certainly familiar with the Oregon presidents, community college presidents, working very collaboratively and cohesively together as a group. So I'm not really familiar with the tone or tenor of competition with that. And I think maybe Grant might have some background on how this all took place. There are 3 colleges that are out front. There's Mount Hood Community College with a cybersecurity degree, and then there are the 2 that were mentioned today.
Yeah, so the process for approval includes, after the statement of need, a 90-day comment period that was designed specifically so that other universities, colleges, other parts of the community, nonprofits or otherwise, could step in as collaborators or partners within these new program and degree types. And so that's part of the process, is to encourage those partnerships. One of the stated goals that the HEC has expressed around approving bachelor's of applied science is avoiding duplication. That's one of the reasons why they put it under the CTE standards framework for program approval, because the CTE standards also include justifications to avoid duplication across the state where necessary. So the process has included a look at duplication. We don't really talk about it in terms of competition, because it's not necessarily competition as much as it is a duplication of efforts that might be happening. So that has been part of the review process, and part of the conversations is what additional are we bringing to this space, and how is it different, and how is it collaborate with our partners.
Thank you. The other thing I just wanted to put out there is just really picking up where Mike left off. I thought it was a really great observation of Mike's, right? President Bolger brought in or gave us a copy of the Great Upheaval and brought in one of the authors. We had a chance to meet with them. And I for one, really was affected by the, what they had to say in their book and in their presentations. I think much of the board was. I don't speak for the board as a whole. So hearing from faculty as they, present new, as you all present new proposals, new programs, to some extent, I mean, through that lens, how are these things sort of pivoting to outputs as one example? That's one of the major themes out of that out of that book. How are we catering to our local economy? And you've kind of hit that one already. How are we being flexible, et cetera, et cetera? And not that we just want to be checking a bunch of boxes according to, Scott Van Pelt. I get that, but nonetheless, I think that we want to be thinking about what the future, needs of not only the institution, but what students are looking for. And that's one guide, I think, that gives us some something to grab onto.
The interesting thing is those are all our questions before we saw his presentation. So we felt pretty good about ourselves.
Lisa.
Yeah, thank you for your work on this. I will certainly be supporting it at the January board meeting. I'm curious about how you described it as a 2+2. I mean, I certainly see how it fits that framework. Anybody could come in, I'm assuming, with an AAOT as well as an associate's degree. But will we also be working with students who come to us for the associates to smoothly move into the bachelor's, and perhaps even find a way that they might move through the program more quickly, thus potentially saving themselves an expense by being able to focus on competencies and moving through the program in that manner?
Yeah, so we have spent a lot of time this past quarter kind of mapping out the courses that we've developed and thinking about how might a student move through these courses, especially a student who is working full time, who has a family, who might have other obligations. And it's not an easy answer. A bachelor's degree, 180 quarter credit hours, it's a huge commitment. It's a marathon. So we've been thinking a lot about some of those ideas, competency-based education, these kinds of things that were brought up in the book. There's not a quick, simple answer to it, but we can work towards kind of finding some of those efficiencies where we can without undermining the learning outcomes that we're expecting students to leave with. So, for example, one of the things that we've been looking at this past quarter is what kind of prerequisites do these courses have? And how can we rearrange all of these pieces so that maybe students don't need so many sequences of prereqs? Because if a student has to take course A, course B, and course C, and then they have a separate sequence, they have to take course D, E, and F, and they miss one of those, well, now they're all out of order. And it doesn't just affect the student's progression through that one sequence, it affects their progression through the whole degree. So time to complete the degree is really important. And we're actively thinking of ways to reduce that. When students come in, we have a dedicated program coordinator who will kind of be the point of contact in our department for these students who want to do a bachelor's degree. If a student came in, they're a first-year student, they're maybe not thinking about what they want to do after year 2 yet, then our program coordinator would be happy to talk with them. Here are the electives you should take that will best prepare you to enter this degree pathway. And so we're thinking of along the same lines for a lot of those kinds of things.
Great, thank you.
I was really excited to hear you talk about students who need to be taking classes on evenings and weekends. I'm sure that that's burdensome for faculty who are, used to teaching class during the day like other schools do. But the community college is a different model, and it's a real opportunity for people who need to take classes evenings and weekends. My dad retired as a professor in the Southern Illinois University College of Education military education program. You may be familiar with this model where there are universities all over the US that staff a desk in a on a military base, and faculty fly in and teach for 2 days on a weekend and go home, and 2 weeks later come back and teach for another 2 straight days and go home. And over the course of 8 weeks, they have taught an entire course. And they're teaching military members how to become teachers of what it is they do on the job in the military all over the world. And that was the job my dad had before he retired. So I mean, there's a lot of models for how to deliver coursework. And these were students who were graduating from the SIU program with a bachelor's degree and going to work as faculty at community colleges all over the country. So this is very exciting what you're working on. It's just so cool. I'm such a big believer in the concept of how a community college is different from a four-year university, and how we can make this access to a four-year degree, which you're right, it's a box that gets checked or a barrier that keeps you from moving forward. So how does a student who has an AA from Lane in media production get into this program? I mean, my question is, that's not a business AA. So what is that kind of student going to have to do to get this four-year degree?
Yeah, so media, I think media production or one of the media degrees, I don't remember the exact names, was one of the ones we looked at when we were thinking about that, because we wanted to look at like, what are some of the more kind of, for lack of a better term, out there degrees that are very different from business. But we want to make sure that when we say a student can come in with any AA degree, we want to make sure that that's true. So the directed electives we've developed, things like Microsoft Excel, accounting, what else is in there? Leadership, management courses. These kinds of courses will prepare students to kind of take that first step into the pool of business. But the business courses themselves are also structured in a way that students won't feel overwhelmed coming into them. We want to make sure that we're very aware of who is in our classes, of what kind of background they have. And in most cases, they're, kind of the diverse academic backgrounds of our students are going to be a benefit in their courses. For example, when they get towards the end, they're taking strategic management, they're doing some sort of co-op or experiential learning type course, and they're integrating all of these experiences. Their associate's degree experience is going to help them to better synthesize ideas and understand the world around them. And that's what we want them to leave with, is the ability to take in all of this information and put together some new idea or make things work a little bit better or interact with the world in a different way.
Any more questions or comments from board members? Awesome presentation. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We're excited to see you in January.
And I cannot stress how much work they have put in. And as you probably saw in this presentation, their focus this entire time has been on the success of their students. And it's been an honor to work with them and impressive as they've worked on it. So thank you.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. So are we ready to move on, or are we done with that particular set of items?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that brings us to one more presentation, Dr. Bulger.
Yes, our final presentation today is about the culinary arts program. We wanted to make sure that we gave you a program update on this program. I know that the board was able to talk about this program roughly a year ago or so.
Yes.
We'd like to give you an update this evening.
Yes, unfortunately, none of the program members could be here between concerts for children and illnesses and being on break. You're stuck with me. So I'll do the best I can to help present it. But yes, as Dr. Bolger mentioned, in January last year, we came to this board to make some modifications to the culinary arts program that this board supported, and wanted to come back and give you a couple of highlights and an update. And I think for me, it's important to have this highlight or this update because one, I think it highlights the what I believe to be an ongoing success of how a program can be transitioned to meet the employment needs that are presented in our changing economy. And secondly, I think it also provides a more public opportunity to counter some of the narrative that sometimes happens around program closures or program changes and otherwise. You know, in our curriculum system, we often have to talk about program suspensions and other things because that's the language that the state uses as we make major changes to curriculum. And that can get confusing because it sounds like we're ending something when really we're transitioning something. And this is an example of that, where we had to suspend some things in order to innovate in some new ways. But the culinary program very much still exists. And with these changes that have been going on is very successful. And I wanted to highlight those. So I'll first start by highlighting some of the changes that have taken place, and then talk about how I kind of classify those as successes. First of all, we consolidated the program into two short-term workplace-focused certificates. The first is a 22-credit culinary certificate, and the second is a 17-credit baking and pastry certificate. If you'll notice, those are two less than 1 year certificates that basically can be accomplished in 1 to 2 quarters or spread out over 3 quarters, depending on the number of credits you take per quarter, which really makes this these some short-term, very focused and targeted programs. They can also be taken together, or the students can take both of those and have two unique skill sets for the industry. One of the major changes that we made was trying to make these programs more accessible. We worked with the prerequisites and other requirements that were in place for the previous culinary program. And by removing some of those accessibility barriers, we've been able to increase the number of students that are eligible to participate. And that's been changes to prerequisites and other things. Just as a note on that, about 2/3 of the students that are currently in the program would not have been eligible for the program under the previous guidelines. And these are students that are being very successful in the program. It's also on its own been able to really expand the ethnic, linguistic, age, and socioeconomic grouping of the students within that program. Another major change that has taken place in the program is that all of the students who participate in the program are eligible for coaching and support. So when students initially apply to the program, they have an expectation of ongoing engagement with a career coach, one of our career pathway coaches. Those coaches talk to them about the wraparound services, and some of the services that are included in those ongoing conversations with the career pathways coach include academic preparedness, time management, personal support plan, financial planning, community resources, and they also do shared management with third-party groups like the employment department if they're working with the employment department. We also work with them on a transportation plan, childcare plan, and physical resource planning, such as how do they find study space or how do they manage their space to be able to take the time to study, as well as a review of basic needs and other barriers that might exist. So a very comprehensive review with each student to identify how we can be of support and how they can set up themselves for success in the program. Another change is that we've really tried to focus on the cost of the program and bring the costs of the program down by having classroom sets of materials so that students don't need to buy all of the equipment themselves, or putting students who are eligible through STEP ICAP jobs or other support services, having those support services buy the equipment for them so that they can have it, has really reduced the cost for the students themselves, as well as by reducing the number of credits of the program. It is a more, it's a more cost affordable, a more cost effective program for them. Through that, through those major changes, this year we've increased our participation in the baking and pastry program to about 16 students, and in the culinary about 13 students. And this represents about 98% enrollment capacity, compared to the previous years that the program was running at about a 53% capacity. In winter enrollments are still active, but we already show our classes at about a 90% capacity for winter term. So our enrollments through this have significantly increased as we've opened up that accessibility, reduced barriers for students, provided opportunities for them to find alternate resources to support them in the program. Now, for those of you that really like to look at the data, and I know as you have the dashboards and are going to be looking at that, I'm talking about how the enrollment in this program has increased and how our capacity is at 98 to 98%. I want to clarify that you will not see that reflected in the data, because one of the things that we have done is reduce the number of credits associated with this program. So if you compare this to previous years, the enrollments will look like they're lower because we have fewer classes that the students are required to participate in order to complete these certificates. So as you look at the data, just be aware of that. We're showing that the enrollments are up from a capacity standpoint and from what we can handle in the program by reducing the needs or the types of programming that exist for them. So those are some of the highlights, and what I feel like is proving to be a very successful transition to the career pathways area, focusing on those workforce training skills and getting our students quickly back into the workforce as they build on these skills. I'm open to any questions that the board has.
Mike?
Thank you, Grant. I appreciate that. I was so disappointed when it felt to me like we were almost putting a death knell to the program a year ago, because I hear routinely from people throughout the community about how much they've appreciated that and how much they've appreciated hiring students from the program. And so I'm glad to know that the program is not dead. I also want to let you know that I appreciate the presentation tonight, because I thought the program was essentially dead, and I've been reading about how well it's been doing, and you have explained that what has seemed like a disconnect to me. So kudos on both counts.
Thank you. And yes, the program is very much alive, and please encourage students.
Lisa?
Yes, so I want to start off first by saying I really appreciate the way you think about these things and the narrative that you're developing. I think we have had this program brought to us with a narrative of one that was not about how we could reduce barriers, increase accessibility, provide coaching and wraparound services, and build engagement with the community. We had this program presented to us with a very different narrative in the past. So I really appreciate that approach to this and thought it was a great report. I'm curious what you meant by workplace focused. Are there like internships or clinical placements that students are participating in?
What I meant by the workplace focus is, one, we've moved it to the career pathways area so that it has a very close connection with some of our industries and others supports. And then also by having it be the curriculum is more focused on immediate employment needs. And so by providing a 22 credit and a 17 credit, we've really looked at how to remove classes that may have been very much focused on on entrepreneurship or restaurant ownership or other types of elements that are in the culinary industry, and focused instead on some of the primary entry skill sets, and then referred students who are interested in building their own restaurants or other things, referred them to programs like the business program, where they'll see accounting classes and other types of coursework that will help them in their overall goal, but really restricting the curriculum in culinary to the skill set that is necessary to quickly return to the workplace.
Great. So you already answered my next question about your relationship to the business degree and department. Thank you.
Other questions? There being none, thank you for yet another excellent report. Very exciting to
Thank
know
you.
how the program is doing. Just great. Board members, I have two more items before we can adjourn for the evening. And for the first one, I'm going to call on Board Member Holly Johnson.
Thank you, Rosie. Okay, so one of the items on the agenda is for me to make an announcement, and due to the changing and the redistricting, I will now be in zone 2 and not zone 1 anymore, which would require me to run a full campaign, which I am not prepared to do. Life happens and things happen. And so I think in 2024, I will not be a resident in zone 1 or 2. So we're going to be looking for someone to be appointed for zone 2. So a change is coming. And I fully support Dr. Bolger and the college, of course. I'm always in support of the college. I'm just happy that President Bolger has developed a plan, and I see nothing but positive changes happening. But I just want to thank everybody. I enjoy my time on the board. I will continue to enjoy my time until June. But just a big shout out to the community, to the outpouring support that I received, Lisa, to Emily and Kevin and Matt and, President Hamilton, everybody, all Greg Evans, all of my board members. So I just wanted to put that out there so that we can hopefully generate some interest in zone 2 and for someone to be appointed to the board. And so
Actually, to clarify, someone could file and run next spring for the zone 2 position if they know you're not going to run yourself. Angela?
Right.
Well, technically, I'm also in zone 2. I'm also not intending to run again. So there are actually 2 of us in zone 2.
Right.
Who will be creating space for someone new to run for the board in the next election cycle.
Yeah.
So,
gee, was it something we said?
Not at all. Not at all. It's been awesome. I continue to support the college, but I just feel like I probably will not be a resident in either zone in that cycle. So
I think the board and the college and Dr. Bolger and the administration will miss both of you very, very much. I'm sorry that neither one of you plans to run again for the board. I'm grateful that you want to let the world know so that individuals who may be interested in Lane will know there may be an opportunity coming up. Comments from my colleagues on the board?
Well, I'll save the goodbyes for 6 months from
Oh,
now,
yeah.
but,
It's a little premature.
Thanks for letting us know now, but certainly we'll find a way to say thanks and support you these last 6 months.
Thanks,
Angela?
the plug for anybody who is interested, the zones are posted on board docs, so you can go look at the map and see if you're in zone 2, which looks different than it used to. So.
Thank you both for giving us a heads up, letting us know your plans, and like Steve says, we'll save the goodbyes and the party for later on in the next year. That was item 1. Item 2, at your places, and I apologize, Angela and Mike and Holly, that I failed to get this to you in advance, but I have distributed to board members a copy of the current status of the Board of Education's budget. At a previous board meeting, we had talked about whether or not there were board members who had an interest in participating in the annual ACCT lobbying activity in Washington, D.C. And that kind of prompted me to want to update myself on the status of the board's budget. So what I have presented is information that tells a story of 2 points. 1 point being that the board's budget was reduced along with all other college budgets when the board previously made a reallocation of resources in support of a priority at the time. I can no longer remember exactly which priority it was, but we asked the administration to fund something that had not been funded at that level. So all budgets were adjusted to find the necessary funds, including the board's budget. So that's point 1. Point 2, as a result of travel to date and other expenses to date, and accounting for projected expenses between January and June, there is a balance remaining in the board's budget anticipated to be about $2,351. So that does not exactly provide enough resources to send board members on cross-country travel. However, there may be other priorities that the board members could discuss for the use of those funds between January and June. So let me stop there with that update to you all and take questions or comments from board members. Mike, and then Steve.
I fully support the adopting this. We don't really have much choice. It is what it is, and we're spending the money on things that we've already deemed to be important. And if it's not available for board things this year, then so be it. That's the way it is.
Thanks, Mike. Steve?
Yeah, another way to summarize this report is to say Austin and I spent all the money.
I wasn't going to say that, Steve.
Well, I don't mind saying it. That's just the plain truth of it. In any case, I'm happy to have gone to that conference. It was a really eye-opening experience, and simultaneously, I see the impact it has on the budget, and that we don't have budget to send certainly all 7 of us to do something like that on an annual basis. So I just want to say for my own part that you'll not see me volunteering or asking or whatever it is to go to any kind of event outside of the state for at least several years to make space for others to do so.
Any other comments? Lisa?
Yeah, thank you for doing this work. I do think we have been thoughtful in how we have spent our money. I agree that it's useful to the college for us to attend those various conferences like Steve and Austin went to. And I also think that having Dr. Miles come and work with us was a great opportunity and much needed. So I appreciate the work. I do think we have been thrifty with the funds we do have. I do hope, though, that as has been mentioned about attending statewide conferences, that board members will consider attending OCCA's lobbying conference in March, and we could even carpool and save money that way. So,
Yeah, I just want to agree with everything that's been said so far. My purpose in bringing this information to your attention is only to keep you in the loop and aware. I remember being elected to the board in May. And practically the very first question asked of me by the college was, well, are you prepared to go to this ACCT conference in Dallas, Texas? And I thought, being a little sensitive about travel on the taxpayer's dime, I called the college president and said, talk to me about board norms with respect to travel. And President Mary Spildy at the time said to me, I really encourage you to participate in this annual conference because you will learn so much. And Steve and Austin, I think it was great that you made the time away from your family to be willing to go to that conference. It's like drinking from a fire hose. I mean, it's an excellent, excellent annual conference. And I do think that over time, everyone on the board should participate at least once, depending upon how long you serve, once or twice and they do move it to the West Coast. Sort of, I mean, my experience was that it was kind of alternating back and forth. So it can become a little bit more affordable for board members to participate if it's on the West Coast, but it was even in Seattle one year. So, but yeah, it's just so board development, as Dr. Bulger pointed out, is so important. And so it's such a good opportunity. So, well, thank you for your feedback. And I do think we should look at Lisa's observation about the OCCA lobby day. We've participated in the past very effectively. I think this is a really critical session coming up. And we can arrange ourselves to get there in an affordable fashion. Steve?
Just to follow up on that, is there a date set or?
I should have it memorized. If you happen to read the government newsletter that comes out each week, it's listed on the calendar.
I'll look for it next
Okay.
week. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yep.
we'll go back and look at that. So those were my two items. Thank you very much. Are there any items for the good of the order from any other members of the board? There being none, we are adjourned.